Hello dear friends, welcome back again to another video from my YouTube channel. Dear friends, in our previous video we talked about the most important, most interesting process, that is pollination. Pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. Now, there are two types of pollination that we have discussed in the previous video. The first one is self-pollination and the second one is cross-pollination. Let us define the self-pollination. Let us recapitulate that we have studied in the previous video. Self-pollination means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower, whereas cross-pollination means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower located on the same plant or another flower which is located on the different plant. Based on that, we have two types of cross-pollination studied in the previous video, that is geitonogamy and xenogamy. Now, after understanding all the pollination process in detail, some of the plants, they strictly stick to perform the self-pollination, and some of the plants, they always want to perform the cross-pollination. That means in nature there are some plants which are always doing self-pollination, and in nature there are some plants which are always prefer to do the cross-pollination. The plants which are preferring to do the self-pollination, they show certain modifications in them. They show certain adaptations in them. Whereas some plants which are completely restricted to the cross-pollination, they also show some types of adaptations in them. Let us try to understand, or let us try to define the types of adaptations in the self-pollinating plants and the types of adaptations in cross-pollinating flowers. The plants which are strictly restricted to the self-pollination, they are commonly called as clistogamous flowers. Clistogamous flowers. And second type of flowers which are always want to do the cross pollination, they are called as chasmogamous flowers. Based on the pollination pattern, based on the pollination type, the flowers are of two types. One is clistogamous flower, another one is chasmogamous flower. The definition of clistogamous flower and chasmogamous flower is very, very important for your board examination as well as for competitive exams. Now, let us define the clistogamous condition or clistogamy type of pollination. Clisto means closed. Clisto means closed. That means they are the closed flowers. The flowers are not open. The flowers are not exposed. The flowers, they never expose their androecium and gynoecium. That is why such flowers are called as closed flowers. Clistogamous flowers are closed flowers where anthers and stigma are not exposed. Here, stigma and anthers, they are not exposed and the flowers are closed. That means definitely the clistogamous flowers, they facilitates the self-pollination. This adaptation is for self-pollination. In competitive exams, this question was repeatedly asked. What is the clistogamous flower? Remember here we have Cl. Here also we have Cl. Clistogamous flowers means they are the closed flowers where anther and stigma, they are not exposed. They lie close to each other to facilitate the self-pollination process. Now, the chasmogamous flower. Chasmogamous flower. Chasmo. Chasmo means opened or exposed. Opened or exposed. Chasmo means opened or exposed, whereas clisto means closed. If the flowers are closed, definitely they are facilitating the self-pollination. Whereas chasmogamous flowers, they are always open flowers. They are the opened. They are the opened flowers with exposed stigma and anther. In clistogamous flower, the anther and stigma are not exposed, whereas in chasmogamous flower, anther and stigma are exposed. If anther and stigma are exposed, that means this type of flowers facilitate cross pollination. They are the two types of flowers based on self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now, after understanding the two types of flowers, clistogamous and the chasmogamous flower, let us recall the thing. What is pollination, my dear friends? Pollination means transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma. Now the question arises whether the pollen grains are motile or non-motile. Pollen grains in angiospermic plants, they are always non-motile. If they are non-motile, that means they require a carrier for the transportation. They require a vehicle for transportation from anther to the stigma. This pollination is the very important journey for a pollen grain. Hence, they need some vectors, they need some vehicles, they need some agents, they need some source, they need some medium for transferring from anther to the stigma. They are called as the pollinators. They are called as pollinators. Pollinators means the agents that causes pollination. The agents that causes pollination. The agents that causes pollination are called as pollinators. Now let us understand this with the help of diagram. Here we have got a beautiful flower located on a plant. Here we have the another plant and it is also having a beautiful flower. In this flower we have got stigma. Here we have got the anthers, and we know where are these pollen grains located. Pollen grains are always located on the anther. Here we have the pollen grains. Here we have the pollen grains. They are all anthers where we have the male gametophyte. Now, these pollen grains, they need to transfer from anther to the stigma. Now, who is carrying them? Who is bringing this pollination process? If this pollen grain dropped on the stigma here, no doubt it is called as self-pollination. If the pollen grain is dropped on the stigma of this, definitely it is a xenogamy, that is a type of cross-pollination. In both the situations, these pollen grains, as we have made it very clear earlier, that they are non-motile. If they are non-motile, they cannot move as of their own. They cannot move. They need a medium. They need a vehicle. They need a carrier for this transportation. These carriers, these mediums, these agents, these vectors, they are called as pollinators. Sometimes the pollen grains are simply blown up by the winds. Some of the cases, in some of the plants, the pollen grains are carried by the water current. In some of the plants, the pollen grains are carried by the animals. Like that, there are so many pollinators, there are so many agents that are causing the pollination. Such pollinators can be divided into two types. One is abiotic pollinators, and the second type of pollinators are biotic pollinators. We know what is the meaning of the word bio. Bio means life. Bio means the living. Abio means non-living. Bio means living. Abio means non-living. Abiotic pollinators, that means they are the pollinating agents which do not have life at all. They are called as abiotic. Sometimes, as we have discussed earlier, the pollen grains are carried by the wind. In some situations, pollen grains are carried by water. If the pollen grains are getting transferred from anther to the stigma by the help of wind, such type of pollination, it is called as anemophily. Anemophily means pollination by wind. Pollination by wind is called as anemophily. In some aquatic plants, pollen grains are carried by water. Such type of pollination is called as hydrophily. Hydro means water. Phily means pollination. Hydrophily, pollination with the help of water, is called as hydrophily. In some of the cases, pollen grains are carried from anther to the stigma with the help of animals, by animals. Such type of pollination, it is called as zoophily. What do you mean by zoo? Zoology. Zoo means animal. Zoology means study of animals. So, pollination by animal is called as zoophily. Pollination by water is called as hydrophily. Pollination by wind is called as anemophily. Again, in animals, we have so many types of animals. Sometimes pollination by bat. Sometimes pollination by bird. Sometimes the insects do the pollination. In some plants, ants do the pollinations. In some plants, snails do the pollination. Like that, there are so many types of zoophily. They are all animals. If pollination is done by the bats, such type of pollination, it is called as chirapterophily. Chirapterophily means pollination by bats. If the pollination is done by the birds, such type of pollination is called as ornithophily. Pollination by birds are called as ornithophily. Pollination by insects, it is called as entomophily. Sometimes in some plants, pollination is done by ants. Pollination by ants is called as myrmecophily. In some plants, pollination is done by snails and sludges. Such type of pollination is called as malacophily. Malacophily. These are the very, very important types of zoophily for competitive exams. Chirapterophily means pollination by bat. Ornithophily means pollination by birds. Entomophily means pollination by insects. Myrmecophily means pollination by ants. Malacophily means pollination by snails. They are the different agents that causes the pollination in some plants. In our next video, we are going to understand about what are the adaptations or what are the modifications adopted by the anemophilous flower. What are the modifications adopted by the hydrophilous flower, and what are the modifications done in the flowers to do the pollination with the help of animals. That we are going to understand in our next video. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.